All right. Well, hey everybody. This is the first of the A.W. Tozer Worship, the reason we were created Bookcast. I'm sitting here with Alfred and Taryn, and I'm sure all of you know these two. We are Beauty and the Beasts, plural over here. And we just wanted to sit down. We've started reading this book, and we wanted to sit down and talk about the first chapter in this book this week. And so I hope this is helpful for everyone as we dialogue and talk about all this. First things first, though, each of you tell everyone a quick 2-minute, a little bit about yourself, and then end it with, if you could pick any animal to be your spirit animal, what animal do you think you would be? Let's start with Alfred.
My name is Alfred. I've been saved for about 17 years. I've been sober for about the same amount of time. I was delivered from alcoholism in 2005 on January the 14th. If I could pick any animal to be my spirit animal, I guess I'd pick an otter.
An otter?
Yeah, I'd pick an otter.
What makes you think otter?
They play all the time. They get to play all the time.
It's a good spirit animal.
Yep.
All right.
I can't even think of a spirit animal. My name is Taryn. I've had a relationship with God since, my dad actually was the one that led me to Christ, which I thought was cool, that like my earthly father led me to my heavenly father. And so since I was a little girl, I've known about him. My spirit animal. First thing that popped in my head is a fox. That's, I feel like, what I want it to be, but I feel like I'm truly more like an elephant. Like slow and steady and gets, scared of small little bugs.
You remember everything.
Not really. I don't have a memory of an elephant. Maybe that's where the fox comes in. Maybe I'm mixed between both.
I think if I had to pick a spirit animal, I think I would go with Roadrunner.
Yeah.
The Roadrunner from the Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Just meep, meep, 100 miles an hour.
That's
Looney
fitting.
Tunes.
That's fitting.
All right. Well, it's good to have y'all sitting here, and y'all be thinking about what your own spirit animal would be. I want to know what your spirit animals are. So first things first. So this first chapter in this book is called "What Happened to Our Worship," and I think Tozer has some pretty profound statements, some big gut punches in the book. But I guess the first question I wanted to ask y'all, what are some ways that we as a church, do you think that we've kind of misunderstood or maybe misinterpreted worship in the church?
It's more than music. It's the time we set aside for worshiping God in the church service, but it's much more than that. It's our daily lives. It's our every breath. This thing punched me in the gut for real. It's our every waking breath. It's our duty. It's who we are.
Yeah.
We're not just worshipers. We're worship. We're worship. We were created to worship, and we are worship.
Yeah.
And I fall way short, and his book pointed that out to me.
Yeah, we're created to worship, aren't we?
Yep.
We're going to worship something.
Yep.
That's how we were designed. What do you think, Taryn?
Yeah, it like even when like teaching kids how to worship, they still have a sense about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the same time and having them having a broader understanding that not just music is worship, but in our daily activities, and describing to them and having them understand that this wide spectrum of worship. But like what you're saying, it was super interesting that we're bound to worship something, you know, like we're created to worship something. And my friend was a missionary in India for a while, and they worship many, many gods over there. And sometimes when she introduces Jesus to them, they're like, oh, that's a lovely God. Like, and then they move on, but they don't kind of get the grasp of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that this breaks down of like, how do we kind of grasp that worship for Jesus and what that worship for Jesus looks like,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
I think we are. And we see that like in my own kids, even from a young age, what they're putting their focus and their attention and their adoration towards. And even people that haven't grown up in the church, or they don't, go to church, they're not believers, they're going to worship something. They're going to be searching. And when it's not God, it falls short. It always feels empty,
Yeah.
So what's something in this chapter that you read that stuck out to you, or maybe something that you read that you really didn't completely agree with? I'm gonna flip through. I have a few things underlined here.
I have conviction written in the margin.
Huh.
Before it says what has happened to our worship. He describes what worship really is on the next page, on page 11.
Yeah.
It's more than just, okay, I don't drink anymore, I don't smoke anymore. It's more than that. It's that's surface stuff.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that, and it goes deeper than that. It's all about the relationship with him.
Yeah.
It gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, that's really good. Because that's what a lot of it is, and I think a lot of what's taught. I was looking at almost that exact same thing. Is one of the things he says is there are still preachers and teachers who say that Christ died so we would not drink and not smoke and not go to the theater. Which, okay, some of that may be a part of coming to know Jesus. Maybe not. I mean, I don't think it's wrong to go to the theater and see a movie or go see a show or any of those things. But he says no wonder people are confused.
Well, that's also like you're taking like other people's like adding to the Bible, which is against the Bible. So when I read things like that, I'm like, but is that even biblical? Yeah. So if that's not even biblical, then that's not worship. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like you're saying things that like going to the theater, like how did they do that? I'm like, that's not in the Bible that we shouldn't go to the theater. Like
thou shalt not go to the theater.
It's not in the Bible, so I'm gonna say Star Wars. Sorry. Yeah. But I feel like there's roots in that. There's roots to reaching people. Like your friends, you go to community, you go together, and there's good morals and principles that can lead to Christ within those arts, and it could be like that time you spent together as a community or as a friend, going and seeing that, and then reflecting afterwards. That can almost be you're still worshiping Christ even when you do your day-to-day activities, and things still can reflect and point to Him. Even if it's in like Star Wars.
Yeah. Going to see Star Wars for Jesus.
Yeah.
Star Wars for real.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such an important aspect because, and it's a cultural thing too, especially deep down in the South here, where it's like, they got saved. They don't drink and they don't smoke anymore. And listen, addiction and drinking and all of those things are things that can become a sin for people. But if it stops there, we've missed the point.
Exactly.
We've missed the mark altogether. We don't come to know Jesus just to stop doing those things. A relationship with God and a relationship with Jesus, I mean, that's why Jesus came, was for that relationship. And there's freedom in that. Now, some of that stuff comes as a natural product of putting our faith and trust in Him. And that's between you and God on what He convicts you of. Mm-hmm. But if we stop there, we miss so much more of the depth and the richness of a relationship with God. I also thought it was something interesting that I loved is on that page 11, he describes the winsome saints. And he talks about some people. Now this book, Tozer wrote this book, I believe, in the 60s.
Yeah, when he was talking about, when he kept on saying liberal, I
Yeah.
kept on thinking a political statement.
Yeah.
And then I researched, I'm like, how old is this dude? I'm like, oh, he's no longer here on this earth.
Tozer's no longer with us.
Okay, he's ancient. Okay, I understand his vocabulary now. It took me a second, because sometimes when you don't know anything about the author historically and you get thrown into something, the wording and verbiage is weird. Even with the Bible, you have to kind of look back in the historical context of what's happening. Why are they telling this certain culture to do X, Y, Z, to not cut their hair, to not? And when you look at the historical stuff, and you're like, oh, I understand why, how we can apply it today. But yeah, I was confused at first, and I was like, what? And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And so I love this paragraph at the top of page 4. So some of that language that you're talking about, he's talking about the liberals, and he's not meaning so much, I think, political, liberal, Republican, conservative, so much there. He says the liberals tell us they cannot believe the Bible. They tell us they cannot believe that Jesus Christ was the unique Son of God. At least most of them are honest about it. Moreover, I am certain we are not going to make them bow the knee by cursing them. Meaning, basically, we're not going to make them come to Jesus by just telling them that their lifestyle is wrong and that they're full of sin. We're not going to make them bow the knee by cursing them. If we are led by the Spirit of God and we show forth the love of God this world needs, we become what he describes as the winsome saints. And then this is where, to me, it's interesting. The strange and wonderful thing about it is that truly winsome and loving saints do not even know about their attractiveness. The greatest saints of past eras did not know they were great saints. If someone had told them, they wouldn't have believed it. But those around them knew that Jesus was living his life in them. I love that.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know who I think of when I think of a winsome saint?
Who's that?
Lamar.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a kind, humble, gentle guy, you know?
Yeah. I think I could completely agree. And we're really blessed that we have some people that really are winsome saints. And they love Jesus, you know, and that's what stands out about them.
Yeah.
And it's so counter to even church culture today, I think, because church culture today is how polished can you be? How cool can you be? Can you have the newest tricks? And you got to look good, and you got to look like you have it all together. And you know, you're striving to be that way, and you're striving to attain this certain image. And the winsome saints, as he describes it, they really don't care so much about that. They just want to share Jesus with people and be a light for people.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with that?
I agree. I think, speaking of Lamar, he doesn't go around blowing his own horn. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He just does what he does. Yeah. Quietly, you know. And it goes along with another book we're reading called Gentle and Lowly. You know.
Yeah.
He's gentle and lowly. He exhibits that aspect of Christ's personality real well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I got a few more quotes. I got some gut punch quotes from this chapter. Those were sort of gut punch quotes, but I wanted to read a couple to y'all and just see if it punches you in the gut like it did me. So here on the next page, on page 12, he says, God has never actually needed any of us, not one. But we pretend that he does, and we make it a big thing when someone agrees to work for the Lord. What do you think Tozer's saying there?
God truly doesn't need us. I mean, we contribute nothing to him apart from what he's already given us to worship him. You know? He really doesn't need us. He just loves us.
Yeah.
You know, when we have our kids, we don't need our kids. We don't, you know what I'm saying? We don't have to have a kid. We don't need a kid. But when we get them, we just love them.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to try that on Gaines next time he's doing something I don't want him to do.
I don't need you.
I don't need it.
Could you pick up your microphone just a little bit?
Sorry.
It was like slowly dropping down. There we go. That's probably, might need to tighten it a little bit. Yeah, I don't need you, son.
Need you.
Remember that? Probably
That would
wouldn't.
fly over really well.
He'd be like, "What, Dad?" Yeah, I don't know. What do you think he's saying there, Taryn?
I have a hard time with that because whenever new believers come in, I think you fully rejoice in that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes on to say, like, to not be ashamed of being verbal and rejoicing in the Lord. So that one I kind of struggled with. Like, I understand what he's saying, but I mean, like, whenever we cheer someone bringing in someone into this world, I think of being rebirth, that's a celebration. You know what I mean? So it's interesting point of view what he's saying. I don't know if I totally agree with it. Like, I know that because we are his creation, you know what I mean? But that threw me off because I was like, but later on you contradict yourself.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, I'm not sure quite what he was saying there.
Yeah. And that's, it's kind of a hard one to hear too. I think what Tozer's trying to say is, although he still delights in those things when we're working and serving him, he doesn't need us to do that. But it's interesting to me because God still uses us to accomplish his purpose. Right.
It's kind of like all of our good deeds are kind of like dirty rags in God's eyes, that kind of perspective. But yeah, it was just an interesting passage because I was just like, I want to keep on reading.
Yeah, because he does kind of contradict himself because right after that he says, we all should be willing to work for the Lord, but it's a matter of grace on God's part. I am of the opinion that we should not be concerned about working for God until we have learned the meaning and the delight of worshiping him. Which that was something I had never thought about before. You know, it's like, yes, maybe we should work for God, but first things first, before we even try and do anything for God, we need to understand what it means to worship him first.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we miss a lot in churches even too sometimes. We want to get people in and get them serving, and we forget, or sometimes we may not help them understand, a new believer, what it means to truly worship first. Like a new believer to come in, just spend time with the church family, basking in adoration of God and who he is. Spend time just worshiping. The work and the things will come. All that comes. But first things first, let's stop and focus on just giving him praise and honor and glory and worship him. I don't know that one's as much of a gut punch. It's just a good statement. Ooh. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I just thought it was funny that he mentioned this nun that like spoke in Latin of like, thanks be to God, or what did she say? I forgot what exactly she said. Well, glory to God, like she shouted her praise and couldn't control herself. But also I was researching her, and like she spent a lot of her life in isolation, which I'm like, interesting. Like, because I feel like she was just a really interesting example. Because I didn't know a lot about her, but I'm also like, you spent a lot of your life in isolation. Like,
not in community with people.
Which I'm like, which she did later on in her life, like not when she said this. This was later on in her life, which it was just a very interesting thing because I was like,
Yeah.
But sometimes like you do have those outbursts of worship, but I think at least for what I saw in her, is that I feel like she didn't continue it, and I feel like we need to continue it.
Yeah.
You know, like to push to just strive to continue on, even when, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
even when you get older.
Keep on. Don't let it stop, and continue it in everything. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, just in our everyday lives, even when we're, even in the smallest details of life, giving God the credit and the glory and the honor, and who knows, maybe even you're by yourself and you're praising a shout to God, and you feel like you might have lost your mind a little bit, but yeah.
We're supposed to lose our mind. We're supposed to take on the mind of Christ. And that is a process, just like worship is a process, you know. When I read that statement, you should not be about working for God until we have learned the meaning and delight of worshiping Him. I don't know all the meaning and delight of worshiping God. I just know a little bit, but I know a little bit more this week than I knew last week.
Yeah.
You know? So it's just a process of just worship Him. Like Pastor David said, it's the difference between doing something for God or doing something from God. You know, it makes it so much easier, man, to just work from God, you know? Okay, this is from God. This is what He's given me to do. He's given me the strength to do it. I can do it, as opposed to let me try to work out my salvation, which is impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
But I love what you were saying of like you learn something new every day. Like that's the continuation. Like that's like kind of that childlike wonder of eagerness of finding more wonderment and worshiping God every day.
Yeah.
I love that, instead of like isolating yourself like that, and then but to keep on pursuing that and to keep on finding new things about God every day. That's incredible. That I feel like we should strive to find that, you know, and because we're never going to know the fullness of Him until we go to heaven.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
the
That's
full
right.
worship of Him.
That childlike wonder of, like, on a daily basis of exploring the new depths of God's love for us and the things that are from Him. Having kids has showed me so much more. It's a great illustration for trying to understand our relationship with God, because I think about Gaines and his excitement, like going to the theme park, and he's just stumbled across roller coasters. And all he wants to do, even when we're at home, is watch videos of like riding roller coasters.
I asked him today, so what was your favorite thing at Disney? He was like, roller coasters.
Yeah.
I was like, which one? He was like, Mount Everest. He loved that. He's like, and then Bigfoot comes out. And I was like, okay.
Yep, Bigfoot, you go backwards. But that, I mean, and he's already talking about going back. Kai at 2 years old is already talking about Disney and all those things. But just that, imagine if we had that wonder about work, because we get older, life happens, we get into the routine, and all of a sudden things start feeling like they're getting a little stale, you know, and we start to slowly lose that wonderment, the twinkle in our eyes, and the daily of thirsting and really going to see what all we can find and learn and what God has for us. And man, that's it. It's just a good wonder of we're changing every day and every week and learning more and more about it.
Yeah. And we learn more and more about Him. We become more and more like Him. You know, I mean, when we start to understand His love for us, it can't help but saturate us and be given out to other people. You know what I mean? It's just His love just naturally flows. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. All right, the last gut punch, and I literally wrote "ouch" beside this one. This one hit me pretty hard. And he's talking about just worship in church, and I think focusing a lot on Sunday morning experiences. But I probably should back up and read a little bit before what I have underlined. Yeah. So he says, it seems to me that it has always been a frightful incongruity that men who do not pray and do not worship are nevertheless actually running many of the churches and ultimately determining the direction they will take. There's a couple layers to this, and he says it hits very close to our own situations, perhaps, but we should confess that in many good churches, we let the women do the praying and let the men do the voting. Because we are not truly worshipers. We spend a lot of time in the churches just spinning our wheels, burning the gasoline, making a noise, but not getting anywhere. Oh, brother or sister, God calls us to worship, but in many instances, we are in entertainment, just running a poor second to the theaters.
I know. It's that wonderment you were talking about. If we could stay in that sense of wonderment that we experience sometimes in His presence, if we could stay there, we'd be good to go. But we don't. You know, like you said, life creeps in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he talks in churches, you know, we're just a poor second to the theaters. We're trying to put on a show that is a high quality, you know, something that people want to come see and experience. And we stop. We leave it at that. And the goal, I think, is to get people in the door, to continue to drive the machine forward of the business of the church. You know, because if you get people in the door, they're tithing, or hopefully tithing, or giving money. They're keeping the business end of the church running, and we're hoping to do that by the quality of the product that we're putting out, mostly on Sunday mornings, but then beyond. And I guess in that sense, what has become our motivation? What's become our focus?
It just makes me think when churches, like, I mean, and sometimes it's really awesome, but when churches put in like fog machines, I'm always like, why? You know, sometimes it feels like a production and not just like giving yourself, you know, like when I'm worshiping on stage and leading the congregation, my favorite thing to do is whenever it gets really quiet and it's just like keys or just completely a cappella, is to step back from the mic and just listen to everyone else worship. Like, that's just magic, because sometimes I don't get to hear that, you know,
all those
and it's
voices.
just like all the voices coming together for Christ. And I'm like, this is the heart of the church. It's not the theatrics. It's not the how amazing the music sounds. Which music, I mean, music's always fun and amazing. That's part of my career, so I'm not like bash on music, no, but I mean, like, being able to listen to all their voices, whether it's in tune or not, being able to sing like that, it just makes me want to cry. I'm like, that's so cool, like, to be able to hear it.
Yep, I completely agree.
And it's like a selfish viewpoint, because I get to see everyone, and I'm like, but it's so cool, because it's like not a lot of people get to experience watching others worship, but to like see their hearts pour out, it's really cool to watch.
I agree. That's awesome. When you hear the congregation singing, it lights it up. It lights up the whole room.
It does. It really, really does. I agree. The best part is when we can step back.
Yeah.
And you hear the voices being lifted, and you see, you know, people worship different. So some people have their hands up, or some people are heads bowed and their eyes closed. But just hearing the body of Christ all in one voice, singing praise and singing truths to God, and using that to glorify Him is pretty cool. And I hope we as a worship team, we talk a lot about this. Obviously, we want to steward the gifting and the talent that God has blessed us with, and having a craft of being able to play an instrument or sing or use your voice. We want to steward that as best as we can, and that does take shape in practicing and rehearsing and running things. But the reason is we want to worship together with our congregation, and we don't want to be distracting or bringing any attention to ourselves in it, you know? And I'm a firm believer that you can bring attention to yourself, one, by being really just bad. I mean, it can happen where somebody on stage or on the platform is playing and it's just so bad that you can't help but ignore. I mean, we sometimes if you've ever played in a different key than what everybody else is singing, a half step off,
It's bad.
I've done that before. And you're just, somebody there that doesn't know music's looking at them and they're just like,
I feel like something's off.
that ain't right. At that point we're being distracting.
Yeah.
But the other side of that too is we could be trying to do so much, or we could be trying to do things that are so flashy, or that can be, like, look at me, look how good I am, look at all the things I'm doing. That as well is distracting.
And I feel like it depends on the age. Like when I'm leading like kids worship, I have more energy, but also there's like movements so they can remember key components of what's being said in their worship, so they can go home and be like, and know the lyrics and know the movements to it. But I'm not going to go to an adult congregation and do a dance for them. It's just a different type of worship.
Absolutely.
Different understanding, comprehensions, and
different ages and kids.
Yeah.
And there's different cultures within worship as well.
Yes.
Which is huge in trying to understand your specific church home, of the culture of that. Like something that might not be distracting here for us in worship in a way that we can worship as a church family. We might go to a different church that has grown up in a different culture.
Right.
Or has a different culture of worship. And it would be really totally distracting different for them. Yeah. And vice versa.
Or it could be seamlessly fit in. Like when we were in Hungary in Budapest, we went to this church called Agora Church, and they started singing Oceans in Hungarian, and we started singing on English on top. And so it's like, this was when the song first came out, so it wasn't like, everyone knew it by this point. But just seeing those two different cultures worship together and not knowing that each other knew the songs, that was incredible. And just be able to worship, and we ended up like all just crying by the end. Yeah. It was just powerful.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's a lot more quotes from this chapter that I could talk about, but I think I want to wrap up. And I think the way I want to wrap up is I want to ask you guys, when is a time that you found yourself outside of the church walls, by yourself? Maybe there was music, maybe there wasn't. But when you found yourself worshiping God in a situation that might be kind of not considered what somebody would normally think of a worship setting.
When I'm in prayer in the middle of the night, that's worship to me. And one of the experiences I had while doing that kind of worship, I was praying one night, and I'm telling you, the glory of God came behind me just like it did Moses on the mountain, and he lit me up. He showed me this beautiful purple rose with gold all around the edges of it, and he said, "This is the rose of Sharon." And I knew he was talking about Christ when he showed me this rose, So that was my most intense moment of worship in my entire life, was being in his presence like that, and having him touch my back the way he did and talk to me, and to know that the God that created everything just talks to you. That was my key moment of worship in my entire life.
And it was the middle of the night?
Middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Miss Teresa was sound asleep.
Yep.
And you just happened to be woken up and couldn't sleep.
Praying. I pray a lot in the middle of the night. It's when him and I meet. There's no noise to turn the TVs down.
Yeah.
It's just me and him. But the God of the Old Testament, the same God who went past his glory passed by Moses on the mountain, the same God does the same thing today. He's not any different, Yeah. He's the same. That just blew me away that a God of the universe would actually talk to someone like me or like anybody, That's, to me, that's worship. Prayer is worship.
Absolutely. What about you?
Surprisingly, when I get home, I don't want to listen to music because I'm around it all day.
Yeah.
But mostly, I really love going out in nature and just by myself. I love taking walks or hiking or anything of that, and being surrounded by his creation. And while talking to him, I feel like that's kind of the biggest point of worship. There's a quote in Anna Green Gables where she's saying that. She's like, I don't want to pray right next to my bed. I want to go in a great big field and look up to God and talk to him that way. And of course they're like, that's not what proper ladies do. You shouldn't be doing that. But that's stuck with me, with that childhood wonder again of like, I'm like, me too. I just want to go in a big field and just talk to him. And just like be surrounded by everything that he's made. And he made me too. And just like, and talk. And I feel like that's kind of what I do for that.
And worshiping in that setting, even, you know?
And I know that's supposed to be a chick flick, but I loved Anna Green Gables. I thought that was the coolest movie.
You know, actually, the books were written by a Sunday school teacher to teach girls Christianly and godly manners and how they should be like. Which Anne's such an amazing character, and you see her develop into this amazing woman too. Yeah. And it's like it was written for her Sunday school girls class. Which I thought was so sweet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I loved it. I thought it was the coolest movie.
I haven't seen the movies. I read at least a couple of the books when I was in elementary school, but I had no idea that's really interesting.
Them. She was a pretty cool Christian lady.
Something you learn every day.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say for me, I think it's sort of similar to you talking about your prayer when you wake up. So my drive to and from the church, depending on traffic around here, because traffic can be ridiculous, but it's about 25 minutes from my house here to the church. So my mornings coming in and my afternoons going home, I get 25 minutes usually alone in the truck because church life. Nicole and the boys on Sundays, they come after usually, and of course during the week they're not coming up with me. But and so what I try and do, and it's become kind of a routine, is that time there's no music playing, there's nothing going, and it's just time that I can pray and talk to God, and I can start off my morning coming in praying, and usually by the end of the day I can go home, and whatever's happened that day I can just talk to God on the way home. And I know around here we talk about model prayers, and well, how should I pray? And we have the Lord's Prayer, and then we have the Acts model: acknowledge, confess, thanksgiving, supplication. But some mornings I don't follow any of those models, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I just talk, and I think if God has a relationship with us the way he does, then that is perfectly fine and natural to talk. And there was one morning in particular, I don't know what caused this, but I was driving down the road, and it was I just thought, I pray to God so often. And I start, with telling him everything that's going on. Like, hey, God, and this is everything that's happening in my life, or these are the people that I want to be praying for. A lot of times it's focused on me, what's happening or what I want. And for whatever reason, this particular morning, it struck me, and I started the prayer with, hey, God, how are you doing this morning? And at that moment, I don't know, I was struck. I could not talk anymore. And it was like the Holy Spirit just poured something onto my brain that was like just the tiniest glimpse of this is how I'm doing. This is the world. This is the people in the world. This is who I love, but this is the hurt. This is the good. This is all these things in that moment, and I couldn't form a sentence anymore at that point. I just rode the rest of the way into church just in silence. I didn't know what to say at that point. And it put me on my knees, to be perfectly honest, in awe. And there's lots of things, especially in church world, that we say, we use the word awesome, or we say things that we know God knows every hair on our head and all. But when we really start to think about the depth of those statements that we make, it'll take your breath away.
It'll make you weep.
Yeah.
The night I had that encounter with Christ, I wept and laughed at the same time. My wife was convinced I lost my mind. and I probably did. Thank God.
Yeah. Goes back full circle to what we said earlier,
yep,
right?
Yep.
About losing our minds.
Yep, thank God.
The other day with the kids, I said, I want everyone to close their eyes, and I want you to imagine never dying, forever carrying on, being with Christ forever and ever and ever. And they're like, I can't. I'm like, I know. Your mind cannot wrap around that. It's so weird. It makes me feel like all like lightheaded and oozy. And I'm like, wow, that's just like, it's so weird because their mind cannot wrap around being with Christ forever, you know? Like,
yeah. Eternity.
Yeah.
I know.
It makes like our time here. Another book we were working through described our life here on earth as a scratch in the grand timeline of the world.
I think that's one of the reasons I like going out to nature too, because every detail about it is so small, but it makes up a masterpiece, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what we are as creation. Like, we're small. We make up God's masterpiece together.
That's
as
it.
worshipers.
We are his masterpiece.
Amen.
Nothing that we did that made us that way.
Oh, no.
But, well, I think that's a great way to end our discussion today by just saying we are God's masterpiece.
Amen.
So, anyways, thank y'all,
Thank
Miss
you.
Fox Elephant and Mr. Otter and the Roadrunner here. It was a good conversation. So I look forward to talking more through this book, maybe with y'all again, with some others of you. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.
Thank you.